Have a sweet nightmares. I've been on the road for the better part of the day, driving through the sprawling outskirts of Arizona. The sun had set hours ago, leaving behind a thick obsidian sky, devoid of any stars. The only light was the faint glow of my car's headlights, barely penetrating the dense wall of darkness ahead. The desert stretched out endlessly, a vast expanse of rocky terrain and sparse vegetation, punctuated by the occasional tumbleweed or cactus. My name's Sam. I'm an everyday Joe, a salesman by trade. I've spent most of my life on the road, crisscrossing the country, town to town, door to door. I thought I'd seen it all. Until tonight. My fuel gauge had been flirting with the red line for the last few miles. I should have filled up at the last gas station, but it looked run down, abandoned. I thought I could make it to the next one. I thought wrong. The car sputtered, coughed, then died, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. Amidst the eerie quiet, my heartbeat sounded like a drum in my ears. No signal, I muttered, glancing at my phone's screen. The one time I needed it, technology decided to give up on me. I sat there for I don't know how long, hoping against hope for a passing car, a good Samaritan. Nothing. Just the whispering wind and the far-off howling of coyotes. Finally, I decided to get out, look around. Maybe there was a house or something nearby. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the chilly night. The silence was deafening, the darkness suffocating. I walked for what felt like hours, each step crunching loudly in the gravel beneath my feet. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered, dimmed, then died. Panic surged through me. I was alone, lost in the middle of the desert with no light, no direction. Suddenly, I saw it, a faint light in the distance. Hope swelled in my chest. I started running towards it, ignoring the burning in my lungs, the aching in my legs. As I grew closer, I realized it was a house, an old one, standing alone in the vast desert. The windows were boarded up, the paint peeling off its wooden exterior. The light was coming from a flickering lamppost outside. I approached the house with apprehension. It looked abandoned, but the light indicated otherwise. I knocked on the door, my knuckles rapping against the cold, weathered wood. Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. Suddenly the door creaked open. I stepped back, my heart pounding. There was no one there, just a dark, gaping entrance. I called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" No response. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The house was as desolate inside as it was on the outside. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, dust covered the furniture. It was clear no one had lived here for years. Then, I heard it. A soft whispering sound, like a breeze. But the air was still. I followed the sound. It led me to a room at the back of the house. The door creaked open to reveal a room bathed in an eerie green light. In the center, there was a chair. And in the chair, a man. His back was to me. He was whispering something in a language I couldn't understand. He didn't seem to notice me. "Excuse me," I said, my voice echoing in the room. The man stopped whispering and turned around. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale. He looked at me and smiled, a ghastly, bone-chilling smile. "Welcome, Sam," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. My blood ran cold. How did he know my name? From then, things took a turn for the horrific. The man started chanting, his voice growing louder. The room began to spin, the light flickering. I felt a cold hand grip my arm. I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. "I've been waiting for you, Sam," the man said, his eyes boring into mine. I screamed, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the room went dark. When the light came back on, the man was gone. The chair was empty. The grip on my arm was gone. I was alone. I bolted from the room, stumbled out of the house and ran. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed on the cold, hard ground. I don't know how long I lay there, but when I opened my eyes, the horizon was tinged with the first light of dawn. My car was where I'd left it, still out of gas. But there was something different. My gas tank was full. I got in, started the car, and drove. I drove until the house was a distant speck in my rearview mirror. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town. I don't know what happened that night. Was it a dream? Was it real? I don't know. But I do know one thing. I'll never forget that house, the house in the middle of the desert, the house with the man who knew my name, the house where I ran out of gas, and I'll never run out of gas again. I want to take a moment to apologize for the brief pause in new stories on our channel. Life sometimes throws us curveballs, but I am back, and with double the motivation. I appreciate your patience and continued support. Now, I kindly ask for your comments and feedback. I want to hear from you, our loyal listeners, because your opinions truly matter to me. In our last story titled The Bear, I experimented a bit with my voice, trying to immerse myself more deeply into the tale. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Did it enhance the experience for you, or was it a miss? Please let me know in the comments below. The story begins in the city of Havre, Montana, a small, unassuming place, nestled against the backdrop of the Bear Paw Mountains. The city's quiet charm is its allure, its tranquil streets lined with small businesses and quaint houses, a stark contrast to the wild, unexplored terrains that surround it. My name is Adam, a middle-aged man who had lived in Havre all my life. I am an ordinary man, a mechanic by trade, not much of an adventurer. But that ordinary life was about to take a turn that even my wildest dreams wouldn't conjure. One chilly winter evening, I was coming back from a service call-out in the country. My old truck, a loyal companion through the years, sputtered and gasped, the fuel gauge dropping dangerously low. The pale moonlight only added to the dimly lit country road, the shadows dancing ominously on the deserted path. The nearest gas station was miles away, lost amidst the vast farmlands. With a final groan, the truck gave up, the engine dying in an eerie silence. I was stranded, alone in the heart of Montana's wilderness. I had two choices: either stay in my truck and wait for morning, or brave the cold, walk towards the city, in desperate hopes of finding help. I decided to walk, the biting cold gnawing at my bones, my breath turning into frosty plumes in the frigid air. The moon was my only guide, its pale light casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to reach out for me from the edges of the deserted road. As I trudged along, an old abandoned farmhouse appeared in the distance, standing like a haunted relic amidst the barren fields. It was a place of local legend, stories of strange happenings and eerie sounds, a place everyone avoided, especially after sundown. Yet here I was, seeking shelter in the very place I'd always feared. The rickety wooden door creaked open, echoing through the silence of the night. The house was as chilly as the outside, the air heavy with the scent of decay and dampness. He fumbled around, my fingertips brushing against the cold roof walls, searching for a light switch. Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the hollow rooms, sending a jolt of fear coursing through me. The sound was strange, like a low hum, growing louder with each passing second. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath hitching as the whisper turned into a growl. I wanted to run, to escape from the terrifying sound that echoed through the forsaken house. But my legs wouldn't move, my fear pinning me to the spot. The growl morphed into a roar, deafening in the quiet house, its source unknown. Then, a sudden silence followed, as if the house held its breath, the quiet nearly as terrifying as the roar. Out of nowhere, a blinding light filled the room. As a brilliant white orb appeared in front of me, it hovered in the air, a spectral entity glowing in the dark. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind spinning with terror and confusion. The orb pulsed, growing brighter with each beat, the intensity of the light nearly blinding. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the orb vanished. The light snuffed out, plunging me back into darkness. The deafening silence returned, leaving me in a state of fear and confusion. I fumbled in the dark, my hands shaking, my body trembling as I stumbled out of the house, the roar still echoing in my ears. I ran, not caring about the cold or the distance, only the need to escape driving me forward. The city lights of Havre finally came into view, a beacon of safety in the darkness. I collapsed at a gas station on the outskirts of the city, Myrdale Finale over. As I gasped for breath, shivering and terrified, the attendant rushed to my aid. I told him about the terrifying encounter, the spectral orb and the terrifying roar. He listened, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night in the old farmhouse. The experience still haunts me, a terrifying memory etched in my mind. I haven't driven on that country road since that night, the fear of being stranded again too overwhelming. But the incident has taught me one thing. Sometimes, the most terrifying horrors aren't the ones found in stories or movies, but those lurking in the most ordinary places. The air was thick with the scent of conifers, and the crunch of gravel under my heavy boots echoed around the deserted countryside road. I was in the heart of Colorado, driving through the winding mountain paths of the Rockies. The towering peaks loomed in the distance, their frosty summits reflecting the pale moonlight. I kicked the tires of my old pickup truck, a solid piece of American engineering. It had been reliable for years, but now it was out of gas. The fuel gauge had been stuck on empty for the last 20 miles, the needle not moving an inch despite my fervent prayers. There was nothing around for miles, just the quiet rustling of the trees and the distant hooting of owls. The nearest town, Silverton, was at least 30 miles away, and I was alone with only my thoughts for company. At first it seemed like a minor inconvenience. I had a spare can of gas in the back. I reached into the bed of the truck, feeling around for the familiar metal container, but my fingers met nothing but empty space. It was gone. A chill wind blew through the trees, the sudden cold making me shudder. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, the worn leather barely offering any comfort. I decided to wait in the truck, hoping that a passerby would eventually come along. Hours ticked by, the silence of the night broken only by the occasional howling wind. I tried to keep my mind occupied, thinking about work, my dog. But the eerie quiet was unsettling. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence. It came from the woods, too close for comfort. I instinctively reached for the glove compartment, my fingers closing around the cool handle of my revolver. I stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching underfoot. The rustling grew louder, more frantic. I squinted into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest seemed to come alive, the whispering pines and rustling leaves painting a scene straight out of a horror movie. Then I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes, low to the ground and staring right at me. I froze, my blood turning to ice. The eyes started moving towards me slowly at first, then picking up speed. I raised my gun, my hand shaking. I fired a warning shot into the air, the echo reverberating around the silent woods. But the eyes didn't stop. They kept coming, getting closer and closer. Suddenly, a deafening roar filled the air, and I saw the creature. It was huge, with matted fur and snarling teeth. Its claws dug into the ground as it lunged at me. I fired again, aiming for the beast. The bullet hit it square in the chest, but it didn't even flinch. It swiped at me, its claws slashing through the air. I dodged, barely avoiding the deadly swipe. I fired again and again, each bullet hitting the creature but doing nothing to stop it. I was running out of options. I could try and make a run for it, but in the dense forest, I would be an easy target. Just when I thought it was all over, a bright light blinded me. A deafening horn filled the air, and a massive 18-wheeler screeched to a halt beside me. The driver, a burly man with a bushy beard, jumped out of the cab, a shotgun in his hand. He didn't hesitate. He fired at the creature, the shotgun blast echoing through the night. The beast roared in pain and retreated into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. The trucker helped me into his cab, his face grim. He didn't say a word as he drove me to the nearest gas station. The ordeal was over, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever. The Rockies had revealed a new kind of horror, one that ran on more than just gasoline. The highway stretched out before me, an endless snake of asphalt cutting through the wheat fields of Kansas. It was the kind of place where you could drive for hours and not see another soul. the kind of place where you'd expect to find yourself in the middle of a Stephen King novel. I'd been driving since dawn, making my way from Topeka to Wichita for a business meeting. The journey was monotonous, broken only by the occasional billboard promising the world's largest prairie dog or the best Kansas City BBQ. As the sun began to set, I saw a sign for a gas station, a faded relic from the 50s, and realized the needle on my fuel gauge was hovering dangerously close to empty. The last place I'd passed was miles back, and I didn't fancy the odds of another one showing up before I ran out. I pulled into the station, a single pump standing sentinel in a sea of cracked concrete. The station itself was an old wooden building, paint peeling from the weather-beaten boards. There was no one in sight, just the hum of the neon sign and the distant rustle of wheat in the wind. I got out of the car, the evening air cool against my skin, and walked over to the pump. There were no digital readouts, no credit card slots, just an old mechanical dial and a slot for cash. I slipped a couple of 20s into the slot and was about to head back to the car when I noticed something odd. There was no sound, no mechanical whir of the pump. The dial remained stubbornly on 0. Just as I was about to go inside and find someone, the pump kicked into life with a jolt, the dial spinning wildly. I jumped back, heart pounding in my chest. The pump stopped abruptly, the dial settling on the exact amount I'd paid for. Shaking off the unease, I filled up the car and got back on the road, the station disappearing in my rearview mirror. I hadn't been driving for long when the car started to sputter, the engine coughing and spluttering. The fuel gauge was dropping rapidly, the needle plummeting towards empty. Panic set in. I was miles from the nearest town, alone on a deserted highway, with a car that was about to give out. Just as the car rolled to a stop, I saw lights in my rearview mirror. A truck, old and battered, pulled up behind me. The driver, a big burly man with a scruffy beard, got out and ambled over. He introduced himself as Earl and offered to tow me to his place just a few miles down the road, where he had some fuel. With no other options, I agreed. I climbed into the cab of his truck, the interior reeking of stale cigarettes and old leather. We drove in silence, the only sound the hum of the engine and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. When we arrived, I was taken aback. Earl's place was an old farm, the fields long since overgrown. The house was a crumbling 2-story monstrosity, the windows boarded up and the paint peeling. But it was the barn that caught my attention. It was newer, well kept, the doors securely locked. Earl led me to the barn, unlocking the doors with a rusty key. Inside was a pristine vintage gas pump, identical to the one at the station. My heart pounded in my chest as he filled a jerry can, the pump whirring to life with a familiar sound. As I looked closer, I noticed something chilling. The dial wasn't measuring gallons, it was measuring years, and as the years increased, Earl seemed to grow younger, his wrinkles smoothing, his gray hair darkening. I stumbled back, horror gripping me. Earl turned, his eyes glowing in the dim light. "Sorry, friend," he said, his voice no longer gravely booty, smooth and youthful. "But a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do to survive." As I turned to run, the barn doors slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. The serenity of the highway was shattered by the raw, guttural roar of my old Chevy truck as it struggled to stay alive. It was late, around midnight, on the stretch of Route 66 that cuts through the heart of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the city lights fade into a distant memory swallowed by the vast open plains. The long, desolate road was lit only by the cold, indifferent stars above, and the occasional flickering street lamp struggling to stay alight, like soldier fighting a losing battle against the encroaching darkness. Out here the world was different. It was lonely, quiet, and the type of eerie that makes your skin crawl. You feel a sense of isolation, as if you're the last man alive, and that the whole world has just stopped. You would be forgiven for thinking you were alone, but the truth was far more unsettling. I had been driving for hours, my eyes growing heavy, my consciousness fading in and out of reality, when the fuel gauge's needle dipped into the reserve. I cursed under my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a rookie mistake, and one that could cost me dearly. I pulled out my phone, praying for a hint of signal. Nothing. Just the cruel, mocking, no service sign flashing on the screen. I was on my own. I tried to push the panic down, to focus on the road ahead. I squinted through the darkness, the bright beam of my headlights illuminating the road just enough to keep me from driving straight into oblivion. I was scanning for any sign of human life, any hint of civilization when I saw it. A dilapidated, rusted sign that read, "Gas station, 5 miles." A glimmer of hope sparked within me. I could make it. I had to. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, coaxing every last drop of fuel from the dying truck. The engine roared in protest, but I paid it no mind. I had to keep going. The road seemed to stretch out forever, the distance between me and the gas station growing with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest like a trapped bird. My palms were slick with sweat. The truck sputtered, choked, then died. I was out of gas. The sudden silence was deafening. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I was alone, stranded in the middle of nowhere. I glanced at the rearview mirror, my breath hitching in my throat. There was something behind me. It was a figure, barely visible in the glow of the moonlight. It was tall, unnaturally so, and thin. Its long, spindly limbs seemed to stretch on forever, and its head was tilted at an odd angle, as if it were studying me. I was frozen, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. The figure moved closer, its limbs bending in ways that no humans should. I could feel its gaze on me, a cold, predatory stare that made my blood run cold. I was not alone. I was being hunted. The figure was closer now, its grotesque form illuminated by the headlights. Its face was a twisted, horrific mask of malice, its eyes pitch black, filled with an otherworldly rage that sent shivers down my spine. I was trapped, a mouse caught in a cat's cruel game. But I wasn't going to just sit here and wait for my death. I grabbed the tire iron from the glove box, my grip on the cold metal firm and unyielding. I was going to fight. I was going to survive. I opened the door, the cold night air hitting me like a punch to the gut. I stepped out onto the road, my boots crunching on the gravel. The figure was just a few feet away now, its form looming over me like a specter of death. I raised the tire iron, my heart pounding against my ribcage. The figure lunged, its movements a blur of speed and ferocity. I swung the tire iron with all the strength I could muster, connecting with the figure with a sickening thud. There was a deafening shriek, then silence. The figure fell, its body crumpling onto the road like a discarded puppet. I stood there, my heart racing, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. I had done it. I had survived. As I stood there, the adrenaline slowly fading, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was alive. I was safe. But as I turned to face the truck, my blood ran cold. The fuel gauge was back to full. I was never out of gas.
It was an evening like any other as I drove through the winding roads of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The sky danced with hues of purple and orange, a spectacular show on nature's grand stage. The road was barely lit, save for the dim headlight of my old Ford F-150. The destination was Asheville, North Carolina, a charming city nestled between the Great Smoky and Blue Ridge Mountains, known for its vibrant art scene and historic architecture. The drive was peaceful, almost therapeutic. The radio was tuned to a local station playing classic blues, the hum of the engine providing a comforting rhythm. The smell of the pine forest mixed with the crisp, clean mountain air was intoxicating. I was alone on the road, the only sound being the gravel crunching beneath the truck's heavy tires. As I rounded a bend, the gaslight illuminated on the dashboard. My heart sank. There was no sign of a gas station for miles. I had underestimated the journey. I pulled over, the truck sputtering to a stop. The silence of the night enveloped me, the only light coming from the dying glow of the setting sun. I zipped up my jacket, stepped out of the truck, and ventured into the wilderness, hoping to find some help. The pine needles crunched under my boots, the cold air biting at my exposed skin. The silence was deafening, only broken by the distant hoot of an owl. Suddenly, I heard a rustling in the bushes. My heart pounded in my chest. I froze. Out of the darkness, a large figure emerged. My blood turned to ice. It was a bear, its fur a dark shade of brown, its eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. I was face to face with a wild beast, its size and power dwarfing me. I could see its breath in the cold air, its nostrils flaring. It was real. This was happening. I slowly backed away, trying to remember what I'd read about bear encounters. Don't run. Don't make eye contact. Make yourself look big. Easier said than done when you're staring down a bear in the middle of nowhere. I could feel the bear's gaze piercing through me. I raised my arms, trying to appear larger than I was. The bear roared, a guttural sound that echoed through the mountains. I stumbled back, my heart pounding like a drum. The bear charged, its massive body moving with a speed that belied its size. I turned, adrenaline pumping through my veins, and ran. I bolted through the forest, the bear hot on my heels. Twigs snapped and leaves rustled as the beast pursued me. I could hear its heavy breathing, feel its presence behind me. I was running for my life, every breath a struggle, every step a prayer. The cold mountain air stung my lungs as I gasped for breath. Suddenly, I tripped over a root, crashing into the leaf-strewn ground. Pain shot through my leg. I tried to get up, but the bear was upon me. Its hot breath washed over me, its growl echoing in my ears. I was sure I was done for. This was it. This was how I was going to die. But then, out of nowhere, a gunshot rang out. The bear reared back, a roar of pain escaping its throat. Another shot echoed through the still night, and the bear retreated into the darkness. I was left there, panting heavily, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. I managed to get up, my leg throbbing with pain. A man emerged from the darkness, a rifle in his hand. He was a local hunter, he said, heard my truck and came to investigate. He drove me to the nearest gas station and helped me fill up a canister. I thanked him profusely, still shaken from the encounter. As I drove away, the adrenaline slowly wearing off, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. I had come face to face with death, survived a bear attack in the middle of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The story seemed unreal, like something out of a movie. But the pain in my leg, the fear that still lingered, reminded me of the reality of it all. It was an experience I would never forget, a tale of survival against all odds.
Please make sure you've hit the subscribe button, given us a like, and don't forget to click on that bell icon so you won't miss out on our next hair-raising tales. Your support keeps me motivated to bring you more of such thrilling content. And remember, it's the things we don't see in the darkness that frighten us the most. So next time you're on a long drive, make sure to check your gas gauge, because you never know what's lurking in the shadows of an empty road. Stay safe, stay scared, and see you in our next spine-chilling episode.